Let's spend a moment of prayer, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you again for an opportunity to come together as your people in this place. We have gratitude in our hearts for all that you have done for us, for the blessings of this life. We're reminded as we see the seasons change around us, we're reminded of your great love for us and how in all these things you have arranged for food, drink, nourishment of all kinds, clothing, shelter, all that we need comes in what you have ordained in this world. For that we thank you. And we praise you for who you are, for the great things that you have done for us in the life of your Son, calling us to be children with him, joint heirs with him of all of your goodness and fullness. We ask now that you be among us in that special way that only your Spirit can. Open the eyes of our understanding, the ears of our spirit, that we might hear what it is you are saying to us in these times and days. We pray a blessing on those traveling who are of our number that have not with us here this morning. We ask that you bless them, return them safely to us. And may they, even this morning, know of our communion with them and you as we share together in these moments. In Jesus' name, we ask these things. So, in thinking about this morning's message, I thought it might be good for us to look at something that I'm sure we're all familiar with. And if you're like me, sometimes we think of these old Bible stories as things that we heard in Vacation Bible School or maybe in Sunday school. I remember growing up, we had these little leaflets that were just a little bit bigger than a church bulletin. And they were like a comic strip, and they would have stories from the Bible in them. And I just loved getting those on a Sunday morning, and you could take that home then and read it through the week. And I learned a lot of those early stories about the Bible right there from those little comic strips. And you know, I'm thinking about things like the story of Elisha and Elijah, or the one that we're going to look at today, which I haven't told you yet, Jonah. And if you'd like to turn there while I'm continuing to talk here, it's in the Old Testament. I don't know what page it is in your Bible, but if you open to about the midway point, and then thumb around a little bit, you'll find some of the big books like Ezekiel and Jeremiah, and it will be just after those. You find Amos, it's Amos, Obadiah, and then along about there you'll start to find Jonah, Nahum, and some of these what we call lesser prophets, or smaller just because their books are so small. But you know, the story of Jonah is one that I can remember thinking about a lot as I was growing up, because you have to consider, was it a whale or was it a fish? Just exactly what happened to him. And I can remember as a teenager being really caught up in the particulars of that story, and how did God make that happen? Well, as I got older, I realized that lots of times on a Sunday morning, we tend to look at New Testament passages when we're hearing the sermon. And we don't often hear these Old Testament stories from the pulpit on a Sunday morning in the worship service. And as I was thinking about that just yesterday, it occurred to me, I think in all of the years I've been in church, I've heard 2 sermons on Jonah. One of them was about 35 years ago, and the other one happened at some point in the early 90s. But other than that, I don't think I've ever heard a sermon on this book. And so as I was rereading it and considering some of what I find there, I was kind of surprised, because some of these things I had remembered hearing, but I don't ever remember them being talked about in a big way. Because, you know, we get caught up in the story of him being swallowed by the fish, and then coming out and following through what he was supposed to do. But I thought, you know, we need to look a little more closely here, because I think that there are lessons beyond some of the big ones that don't occur to us when we first take the thing down off the shelf and look at it. It's only when we start to look a little more closely and maybe polish it up a little bit that we see some of these other things. It's short, so I'm going to read the whole story. I want you to follow along with me if you have it there. And as we hear the scripture read, remember that the Holy Spirit is at work among us even now. And you might have something occur to you as you hear these words or follow along. And so God may have something for you even before I go off on the comments that I'm going to have a little bit later. So it starts, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. And paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below the deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, and we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let's cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." They cast lots, and the lot fell to Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" He answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running from the Lord because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and all will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried to the Lord, "O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Lord, have done as you pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From the depths of the grave I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the deep, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I have been banished from your sight. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep sea surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you brought my life up from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was taken away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. But I, with a song of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. Salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh, and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. Now Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go all through it. Jonah started into the city, going a day's journey, and he proclaimed, 40 more days, and Nineveh will be destroyed. The Ninevites believed God. They declared a fast, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. When the news reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. Then he issued a proclamation in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let any man or beast, herd or flock, taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent, and with compassion turn from his fierce anger, so that we will not perish. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he had compassion and did not bring upon them the destruction he had threatened. But Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. He prayed to the Lord, "Oh Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? That is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." But the Lord replied, "Have you any right to be angry?" Jonah went out and sat down at a place east of the city. There he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord God provided a vine and made it grow up over Jonah to give shade for his head, to ease his discomfort, and Jonah was very happy about the vine. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm, which chewed the vine so that it withered. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. He wanted to die, and said, "It would be better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Do you have a right to be angry about the vine?" "I do," he said. "I am angry enough to die." But the Lord said, "You have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city?" I think it's remarkable that the story just ends right there with that question that God asks Jonah. So, as we look back at the beginning, we see a number of things here that really stand out to us. First of all, it says, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah." Now, what does that mean when it says, "the word of the Lord"? Well, we know from New Testament understanding that when we talk about the word of the Lord, or the word of God, the New Testament writers believe that's who Jesus was. There's a sense in which this word of the Lord represents everything that God is. It is his expression of himself. And then it is made perfect in the person of Jesus. Here in the Old Testament, he would send his word, his wisdom, to the prophets, who were then commanded to go and proclaim it. And he says, "Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it." Now, have you ever wondered in your own life what the will of God for you might be? Think about that. If not now, maybe at some point in your younger years, that you thought, "I really want to follow the Lord, and I want to know what his will, what his plan is for my life." What is that? I can remember asking such questions myself, spending time in prayer about it, conversations with other people in church. What is the will of God? How do we know it? Jonah didn't have to wonder, did he? God says, "Go to Nineveh and preach against it." In fact, he says to Jonah, "Arise and go to Nineveh and preach against it, for its wickedness has come up before me." So what does Jonah do? Being the good follower of God that he is, he thinks, "I ain't going to Nineveh. I know I need to do something. I'll go to Tarshish." So imagine, if you will, living here in this part of Indiana, and God says to you, "Arise, get yourself up, and go to the great city of New York and preach against it, for its wickedness has risen up before me. And you say to yourself, New York, huh? Well, God, I don't like to drive in New York. So, I know. I'll go to San Francisco instead. Now, you think about your map of the United States, right? New York's that way. San Francisco's back this other direction, right? If we look at the maps of the Old Testament times, we know that Nineveh was far to the west of where Jonah was. We don't really know where Tarshish was. I was reading that it could have been anywhere from the middle part of the Mediterranean on one of the north or south coasts. It might even have been as far away as Spain, in the other direction from where Nineveh was. Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish, San Francisco. But he went to Joppa first. And I thought, that would be like us. We get the call of God. He tells us exactly where he wants us to go, and we think, not very comfortable with that. But I need to do something, right? I'll head for Indianapolis where I can buy a plane ticket, and we can go from there. So maybe that's what Jonah was doing. Who knows? But he goes to Joppa, and then there he buys the passage to Tarshish, and he gets on the ship, right? And as I was thinking about this, where is Nineveh in relationship to where Jonah was, and where is Tarshish? And I kept trying to find where Tarshish was. It occurred to me, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because Tarshish wasn't Nineveh. So, if God was calling us to go to Indianapolis, we said, well, we'll go to Plainfield instead, it wouldn't matter. Plainfield isn't Indianapolis. Tarshish wasn't Nineveh. So it didn't matter if it was 2,000 miles away or just 20 minutes away. It wasn't where God told him to go. And I thought, another remarkable thing here is that Jonah wasn't just running away from what God asked him to do. He was running away from the Lord himself. It says in verse 3 there, Jonah ran away from the Lord. Then a little bit later it says, he boarded the ship for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. He didn't want to just get away from the job that God had given him to do. He was trying to get away from God himself. Well, we know that this doesn't always work out for people when they go against the will of God. And so then we find out that God sends this big storm. And where was Jonah? Asleep. And I thought, if I were running away from God, would I be sleeping during the storm? Or would I be afraid that I was outside the will of God? So this Jonah really had some sense of self-security, I think. He must have believed that even if he wasn't going to do what God told him to do, that somehow God was going to watch over him. I don't know, but when I read that, I thought, this is amazing, isn't it? He's asleep while this storm is going on. And we know that by the time he's awakened, the crew, they've already done everything that they could to make things stable. They've thrown over the cargo. And so finally they wake him up. And here the text is a little confusing because we read in verse 10 that the crew knew that he was running away from the Lord because he had told them. Huh? So Jonah doesn't even make any secret of this, that he's trying to run away from God. I mean, that's not the sort of thing that I would just share with the casual people that I meet on the trip if that's something that I was doing. And the reason I think it's confusing is because up in verse 8, he says the crew's asking him about where he comes from, about what people he is, and what do they need to do. But they already know that he's running from God because Jonah has told them that. Interesting, to say the least. Well, Jonah knows right away that he's the reason that this storm is happening to them. So he says, just throw me overboard because I'm the reason. This is why all of this storm is happening. It's why the waves are so rough. And until you do, it's only going to get worse. And then in verse 13, the men don't want to do this. And I think that is really, really remarkable in itself. We don't get the sense that this crew, that they are part of the Israelites, that they are part of the community of God's people. And yet, they find it in their heart, they don't want to do this thing that Jonah has said to them. They don't want to throw him overboard. They want to save him. And then, even more astonishing, is that when they finally do decide to throw him overboard, they pray to God, the living God, Jonah's God, our God. They pray to him, don't hold this against us, because it's clear that it's something that you want. So Jonah's presence among them wasn't supposed to be there, was it? His presence among them ended up bringing them to know something about God. And they actually turned to him in those moments. And then we come to the part of the story that we all know so well. God provides a great fish to swallow Jonah, and he's inside the fish for the 3 days and nights, during which time he prays, and we have the content of his prayer. We heard it earlier. And he talks about being swept up by the waves. And yet, even here, in the midst of the fish's belly, here he will have faith and pray to God and toward God's holy temple and place. And so then God commands the fish, after this time has passed, and Jonah is vomited onto the dry ground. And now, chapter 3, verse 1, probably the most amazing verse in the entire book. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. And I think that speaks wonders to us. If Jonah had received this specific, exact call from the Lord and chose to disregard it and run away from God, even after that, God comes to him again, in spite of the fact that he was let down by Jonah the first time. But the message, the vocation hasn't changed. He still says to Jonah, go to Nineveh and preach the message that I gave you to preach to them. And so this time, Jonah goes. And we read what happens. The city is huge, 120,000 people. I mean, we would think of that as a big city, even now. And this was all of this time ago. 3 days is what it takes to go through the city, according to the text here. And so Jonah starts at one end, and he preaches his way through, and then, what do you know? The people actually believe the message. And so this, of course, as with any great preacher who is out to save souls and win people for Christ, Jonah is just thrilled that the people have turned away from their sin. Wait, what? No, I guess not. He's not pleased, is he? It says Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. So, I mean, imagine what he did. It says that he went out east of the city, and he builds himself a little shelter, and he's probably thinking, yeah, we've preached the message, going to be destroyed in 40 days. Let's pop some corn here and watch the fire and brimstone fall. Didn't quite work out that way, did it? The people believed his message and turned to God, and so then Jonah, he's mad about that. What's with this guy anyway? In fact, God even asks as much. Do you have any right to be angry? Now, as you read chapter 4, I kind of think that we need to read chapter 4 in the way that sometimes you will see television programs present a story. And sometimes you'll see something happening with some people, and then there'll be a little break, and then you'll see another viewpoint that's the same time period. I think that as we read chapter 4, it's not necessarily to be read that this is how it happened in chronological order. I see Jonah going out, building himself the shelter, and the vine that it says God sends to shelter him. I think all of this kind of happens. God sends the worm, the vine dies, then God sends the heat, so that Jonah gets so hot and miserable that he just wants to die. I think that's when God asks him the question. You have a right to be angry about all this? And Jonah says, I do. Now, as someone who teaches, I've learned that when I ask certain questions, students will take on a certain fear. I've even had to explain to them, look, when I ask you a question, I need to know the answer just so I can help. So when I say, when you tell me, I'm really having trouble with this thing that you asked me to do, when I say, well, how much have you practiced it this week? It's not because I'm setting you up to yell at you for not practicing. It's because I need to know how much time you've spent with it before I know what to tell you to do next. But if I ask that question, how much time have you spent with it this week? There's, probably not as much time as I should have. That's my favorite answer. And then I always say, that doesn't answer my question. How much time did you spend with it this week? So anyway, being on the teacher side of it, I sort of feel sorry for Jonah. Because I would think, if God asked me that question, I would be like, oh my gosh, how am I going to answer this? I've said for years, if you're married, you've got to be careful. You don't want to let yourself get in a situation where you're asked certain questions, right? Does that look all right in this outfit? Does my hair look okay? Does this make me look fat? I mean, if you're asked one of those questions, you've already moved up. You've got to just prevent that circumstance from happening. And I'm thinking, Jonah, if God's asking you, do you have a right to be angry? And you say, I do. I'm angry enough to die. I'm like, whoa. Now it's coming. And indeed it does come. God lets him know, doesn't he? Okay, so let me get this straight, Jonah. You had this vine come up overnight to give you shade. You didn't plant it. You didn't pull the weeds from around it. You didn't hoe it and water it and fertilize it, did you? And then just as fast as it comes up, it dies overnight. But yet you're angry, and you didn't do a thing to make that happen? Here's a city of 120,000 people. Some of them don't know their right hand from their left. Now, whether that means God's talking about a general level of ignorance, or if that's a figurative language for they don't know right from wrong, I'm not sure, and it doesn't matter. God says 120,000 people, they don't know their right from their left. And in addition to all these people, there's all of this wealth here. These cattle and animals. And you're saying that I shouldn't care about that? We can only imagine how that must have hit Jonah. I hope that he had an epiphany, a realization that his heart was not quite in the right place regarding the Ninevites. And who knows why he felt this way about them. I mean, historically, the Ninevites were enemies of the Israelites. So perhaps it was that. I guess that would be a form of racism. But in any case, I do hope that, because it doesn't tell us, I hope that Jonah had a change of heart. So, what are some of the lessons then that we can take away that maybe we haven't thought of yet? The first question that occurred to me was, has the word of the Lord come to you? Has it come to me? Do you have a clear idea of what he would like for you to do? What he would have you to do? What message he would have you to say? Where is your Nineveh? Or where might we think a Nineveh would be? New York? More likely, I think it would be proper to say that Nineveh to us might be Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, or Islamabad, Pakistan. Some place that is in the heart of a people that we would consider our enemies rather than our friends. That's how I think Jonah thought of Nineveh. And then where is your Tarshish? Your San Francisco or Miami Beach that you would go to get away from God. So here was a statement that I wrote that I want you to take away. If God calls you to preach to Nineveh, don't buy a ticket to Tarshish. God calls you to preach to Nineveh, don't buy a ticket to Tarshish. Another big lesson that had never occurred to me when I was younger. God will work in the lives of the people around you, whether you are obeying Him or not. Think about that ship's crew. They came to know God and to worship Him. They prayed to Him. They made vows to Him. And look at the text again. It wasn't while the storm was raging that they prayed to Him. Think about the times probably in your own life where you have felt driven to cry out to God and make promises to Him when the things are bad, right? It's not when the things are real great that we draw close to God. It's when they're bad. But this crew, they made their vows to God after the storm had passed. The waters had calmed. And it was then that they prayed and made vows. Yeah, they cried out to God beforehand as well, but they made their vows to Him afterward. And Jonah wasn't even supposed to be there. He was supposed to be in Nineveh. So, again, the lesson is God will work in the lives of people around you, whether you are obeying Him or not. That doesn't mean that you should disobey God. I'm just saying, God will work His will in spite of you sometimes. Not necessarily because. Another lesson is that of Jonah in the whale or fish or whatever it was. Worship God in the worst of circumstances. It's still the right thing to do, and it's an expression of your faith and will strengthen you in those times. Don't you think that's how Jonah must have gotten through those 3 days? And what is your great fish today? I mean, we read here the story as a literal event with a literal fish. But I know that I've sometimes woken up in the middle of the night with the feeling that everything in my life is coming down around me. That the floor is not finished, the walls are open, the power's not done, there's no furnace, there's a bat flying around the room. That sometimes I think feels like what this great fish must have felt like to Jonah. The lesson of the book is worship God then, just as you would here on Sunday morning. Of course, obey the word of the Lord, whether you like it or not. Jonah, even when he came around after being in the fish, and he obeyed God and went and preached the message, he still didn't like it. He didn't feel good about it. I mean, we tend to think that when we do the will of God, we're going to feel good about it, good things are going to happen, and we're going to celebrate. That wasn't the experience of Jonah here, and it may not be ours every time either. Next, it occurred to me, we talked a little bit about this earlier, if God asks you a question, consider your answer carefully. If God asks you a question, consider your answer carefully. Because His questioning is probably His way of teaching. And then, lastly, is the lesson that God gives Jonah at the end of the book. He loves the world, not just the people who are called by His name. He loves the world and everyone in it. And I guess, back to an earlier question that I posed, you know what the will of God is for you. You do sort of know, don't you? Because we read in Matthew, right before Jesus went into heaven, he said to his followers, go into all the world, teaching, baptizing, and making followers of Christ. So, those are the thoughts that I have for you this morning from Jonah. Next week we're going to talk a little bit more about this knowing the will of God and how we might discern that. And we'll be looking at New Testament passages next week. I'll leave you with this thought about Jonah. I'm not 100% certain of this, but I believe that Jonah is quoted more often by Jesus than any of the other Old Testament writers. So you might want to look up sign of Jonah and then read some New Testament passages about that. Because we find several ways in which the experience and story of Jonah foreshadows what Jesus' experience was in the New Testament. Let's pray. Father, we thank you again for your word. We thank you for your presence among us. We ask now that you empower us to go forth from here and to be your people, to share your words, and beyond your words, to share your heart with those around us and with those that you send us to. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand and sing our